Hello and welcome to episode 19 of my video podcast. My name is Mel and I am a botanical dyer living on the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland. And yep, if you're new here then welcome, and if you're a returning viewer then welcome back. Hi. Okay, so I have knitting content and I actually do have a little bit of sewing content. It's something I did a bit back, but I'm only just showing on the podcast now, so I'll get to that after the knitting part. I do have a finished object. I am wearing it. I showed this part done on the podcast last time and I will stand up and show it you in a moment, but this is the Bly cardigan by Amy Christophers, and I've knit this quite oversized and I have been living in it. It's already starting to bobble because it's pure wool and it's just so snuggly and I just want to wrap myself up in it. It's like wearing a cozy blanket. So I will stand up and show you, or I will attempt to because I have a chair here. But I've knitted really quite long and it is a raglan style sweater, as you can see. And I have knit this on a much bigger needle than the gauge called for. The pattern, which I can't find, it should be here. Oh, that's the next one to show you. That's not the right one either. Where the hell's the pattern? You can, okay, there you can see the pattern. It is a basic raglan cardigan. The original pattern is knit in worsted weight yarn, which is kind of heavy DK light Aran weight if you're UK based, and on a 4.5mm needle. I have knit this with an Aran weight yarn, but I've knit it on 7mm needles to make quite a loose gauge. I've knit this with Drops Alaska in colourway 05, which is this, as you can see, like quite a, it's a charcoal kind of a black grey yarn, and it's quite a heavy Aran, what I would call a heavy Aran. And I've knit my husband's colourwork sweater, the name eludes me right now, Umpqua sweater, in the same yarn, and I knit that on 4.5mm needles, which I think is the recommended needle. No, it's 5mm needle for this, and it's fine. But I wanted it to be to be quite drapey, and like this is kind of like a giant hugging cardigan blanket type thing. So I've knit this on a 7mm needle, and in changing my gauge I knit the smallest size of the cardigan. It is a top down raglan, which is perfect. I even knit it flat, I didn't steek it. And you're supposed to knit the button band on afterwards, but instead what I've done is I've knit a garter band as I've gone. So as I've knit back and forth, I've knit this garter band on the neckline, and then I just picked up the stitches to do the collar ribbing at the end when I had finished. I've knit it quite long, as you saw, and I've put just a little bit of waist shaping in. I think I decreased 4 stitches each side to the waist, and then back out again over that much around the waist, just kind of brought it in and back out a little wee bit. The rib, I've done a 1x1 twisted rib on the cuffs and on the collar, because I thought it would match better this what would you call it, pronounced rib would work better with the garter ridges on the button band. Really happy with it. I did my ribbing in 6mm needle, and obviously the garter was just done in the 7, then knit the body. And what I've done is every time I've come to the end of the row I've slipped the last stitch, and then when I've turned I've just knit that stitch, but I've slipped it on its first go through, and that's made it nice and a little more structured and not too stretchy and baggy. It means it's not gonna just kind of stretch out. I haven't knit buttonholes. Because I hadn't planned on putting buttons on this, and I don't intend to. Like this is, I can, if I was to button it, it would be fine, but it's so big I don't need to button it, and I can kind of like wrap it over myself when I'm sitting around and keep myself warm, and it's been perfect over the last few days when the weather's turned pretty grotty here, to be honest. So that's my one and only finished object for this episode, but I do have some works in progress. Okay, my first work in progress I showed on the previous episode, and that is my Salem sweater. I'm going to try and get this out because there's a lot of yarns attached to this. I finished the most of the body, as you can see. I've knit quite a bit of length on it. It's at the point where if I was to get really short on yarn, I could quite happily knit the waistband. Is it a waistband? The bottom band, waistband. On the bottom, I could knit the bottom rib and be happy with the length. It would be slightly cropped, but it would still be hitting sort of hip crease length. The reason I've stopped and cut my yarns there is because I don't want to run out of yarn doing the sleeves. The sleeves have a hard to show cable pattern all the way down the sleeves, just down the sleeves. The body itself is plain, and as you can see, this is where I've separated for the sleeves and the body. This one's still on its cable, and I am working on the first sleeve of this sweater here. I've got a reasonable amount done so far, and I'm making these full length sleeves as the pattern is supposed to be. I've got 6 balls of yarn attached to this because I'm alternating 3 skeins of yarn, indie dyed yarn, 2 of my own, 1 of another dyer's yarn, and then holding them all double with a fluffier yarn as well. Okay, so the 3 indie dyed yarns I am knitting with are these 3 skeins, which look closer in colour in real life than they do on the camera. I've got this one, which is Bling Bling by Old Maiden Ant, and it is on a gold sparkle base, which was probably not going to show on camera. You can, yeah, you can kind of see it's sparkle there, and it is a multicoloured yarn with lots of burgundy and orange and such like in there. I'm using a skein of my own botanically dyed yarn in the colourway Ruby, again on gold sparkle base, which you can kind of just see, and a skein of my own Ruby on a non-sparkle base because I only had 1 skein of gold sparkle to hand. So that's why I'm alternating all 3, so 1 row of each, and I'm helical knitting them so there is less of a jog where the different yarns cross over. And I'm holding them all double with this yarn, which is Drops Alpaca in the colourway, what colour is it, 3969, which I believe is red mix, purple mix, I think it's red mix, but it's kind of like a burgundy flecked yarn with little flecks of like a violet blue in there as well, and it's making a really lovely fabric. It's showing up very orangey on screen there. If I kind of hold it, I'll just try and find a place where it can show the colours, but you can see all the different flecks in there. It's blowing out a little brighter on screen than it actually is in real life, but even if I hold it back, it's kind of, it's not really showing the colours off very well. And alpaca, it has a twisted 1x1 rib on the collar, which is where I got the idea for doing on the Bly cardigan. It will have the same on the bottom and on the cuffs as well, I believe, but I haven't looked too closely at that yet. It's taking a while. I'm not the biggest fan of cable knitting. I can do it, I don't enjoy it. I find colour work, I can kind of follow a chart while watching TV and kind of glance at it, yeah. But with cabling, I find it takes that little bit more concentration and it just takes that a little bit longer. So a cable panel I can cope with. A whole cable sweater would drive me nuts. I like cabling. I don't like doing it. I would rather knit lace or colour work, or I haven't tried brioche yet, although I should probably try. It's on my to-do list. But no, I like the finished result of a cable. I don't enjoy knitting with it. But I love the finished result, so I'm persevering, and that's why I decided to pick this, because it's only got a little bit of cabling. And it's not overly complicated cabling. It's, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show it, but it's quite a simple one, and it's got some bobbles there too. But this yarn is not the best one for showing, and it does show up a little better in real life. Much better actually, because it's not blowing out. The original sweater calls for a, where are we, 3.75mm needle with a 23 stitch gauge and 36 rows. But I'm knitting mine on 4mm needles because I'm holding the alpaca yarn is thicker than the original pattern calls for. The original pattern is a single weight and a lace weight mohair yarn, and I'm using a fingering weight held double with another fingering weight yarn, so it's slightly bigger gauge. I'm coming up at, well, I'm knitting it at 18 stitch gauge instead of 23 and 24 rows instead of 36. So I am knitting a smaller size. I'm knitting the smaller size again, and I've tried it on and it fits really nice. It's supposed to have a lot of positive ease, around 12 inches of positive ease, but I didn't want it to be that big. Instead it's got a few inches of positive ease, but it means it fits, not clingy, but it's kind of, it just shapes to your silhouette rather than just kind of hanging like a boxy sweater, which is not what I was after. So that's perfect. So that is my first work in progress, which I'm plodding along with. Okay, my next work in progress I showed on the previous podcast as well, and this will probably be the last time I show it before I finish it. And it is a pair of socks. I have another garment, but that was a sneaky cast on. That's coming up. But I showed these on the previous episode. These are just my basic vanilla socks, you know, toe up, eye partridge heel, which you can see there, and I've just up to where I'm going to knit the cuff, which is why I've switched on to my large circular needle rather than the little 9-inch circular that I knit the rest of the sock on. This is a indie dyed yarn by, there's a little Cinnabar Pink, which I struggled to show the label last time and probably will again, but Cinnabar Pink in the colourway Rowanberry Lane. And this was a sock set, and I believe the red is just called Rowanberry and the self-striping is Rowanberry Lane. I did a slip stitch on the ball of the foot because it is a merino nylon base, which won't last me 5 minutes, especially if I didn't slip stitch the ball of the foot. The main body is knit on 2mm needles, and the cuff and heel and toes are on my 2.25mm needles because I knit tighter on magic loop than I do on a 9-inch circular. And I've even got a Christmassy stitch marker on there, a little Christmas tree, because why not? If I'm going to use a Christmas colourway, I may as well have a Christmas themed progress keeper too. Really like them. The colourway is lovely. I fell in love with this the first time I saw this colourway. It's this kind of light red and khaki green, beige and a dark grey, which you can, camera keeps wanting to focus on me. There we go. Again, it's blowing out a little bit, it's slightly darker. I'm struggling. I have my lights set up today, but I should have recorded yesterday when it was nice and sunny, and I didn't because it got so late in the morning and it got too late to set up really. It takes a long time to set up for recording, and it's pretty gloomy out there today, but it's bright enough, but it's blowing out everything a little bit on the camera. So that is my third whip. We have one more whip to go, and it is a sneaky cast on that I cast on a week or so ago. I've been wanting to knit for a while, and I've got it in one of my bags that I made before Christmas, and it is the Dyer cardigan by Fibre Tales, Laka from Fibre Tales podcast. And I'm just going to see if I've got a picture on this pattern that I can show you. I tend to print mine out in black and white, which I shouldn't really, because then they're difficult to show on the podcast. But it is this cardigan, which is a simple, it's slightly cropped, but I'm not sure how long I'm going to make it because of my yarn. And it's got this detailing on the button band and on the cuffs. And it is originally knit in a tweedy yarn, which is what I'm doing too. I'm knitting this on a sock yarn actually, and it's Regia Tweed, which is a DK weight sock yarn in colourway 17. And let's see if I can show you. It's like this biscuity coloured yarn with little brown tweedy flecks in it. I can't leave a pattern well enough alone, because this pattern originally is knit bottom up and pieced. So you knit all the back, bottom up, and you knit the fronts, and you knit the sleeves, and you knit the button band separate as well, and then you stitch everything together. Yeah, I don't think so. So I've made things difficult for myself because I like doing that. Plus it appeals to my mathematical brain. Maths and science are my thing, and not so good with the arts. Funnily enough, considering I do creative business, you know, yarn dyeing, and I knit and such like. But actually I have a logic brain, so maths and science are my thing, and it kind of appeals to that mathematical side of my brain. So I'm knitting this top down, surprise surprise, and in one piece, kind of. So what I've done is I've started by knitting the back from the top down, which means I had to change up the short rows to account for that. And it has this detailing on the side, which with it being a drop sleeve sweater is kind of round here, and then it'd be down the underarm. And then I've picked up, once I've got down to the bottom of the underarm, I've re-picked up the stitches at the top of the shoulder, and I am starting to knit down the front, and I'll get to the same point and then I'll start knitting the sides and the back all in one piece. What I've done for the button band is the button band should be knit in one great big long strip and then sewn on and up and over and around. But the button band is knit in the same direction as the knitting, so instead of doing it as a separate button band, I'm knitting it as I go. And the way I made that work is I picked up the stitches halfway along the back of the collar. It's much stretched out here, so there. Picked it up halfway along, and then I knit the button band onto the back that I'd already knit. And then when I got to picking up the stitches for the front, I carried on knitting, and I'm working my way down. So if I show you the front, this is the side where the sleeve is, and this is the back, and this is the front going down there. And you can see I'm doing the button band as I go. It's a kind of like a half rib. I don't know what the proper term for it is. The original pattern called for a, what do you call it on the end? I can't remember what it's called. Bear with me. The original pattern called for an I-cut edging, which has got slip stitches on both the front and the back of the knitting, and it was working up really tight and really distorting the cardigan. And when I look at other people's projects of it, it does seem to distort it a little bit and pull the front of the cardigan quite a bit higher than the rest, but in a messy way, if that makes sense. It kind of, instead of it just looking kind of scooped, it looks tight. So what I've done instead is basically what I did with this, which is I'm slipping the last stitch on the knit side as I go, and it's making it a firm edge but not an overly distorted one. Obviously with me knitting top down, the feather pattern on the edges will be in reverse, so instead of the patterns up the side of the garment, they kind of come together like in this shape all the way up like a fir tree. Mine will be V-shaped, which looks more like a feather to me anyway, but they'll be that way up instead, which is fine. And I really like it. It's like you can see the colouring better on my knitting than in the ball. It's this kind of a biscuity colour with these little flecks, and I really like it. And yep, a nice neutral cardigan for my wardrobe, which is definitely needed after doing colour work and such like. So that is my final work in progress. I am knitting this on 4mm needles. The yarn is a DK weight, and 4mm is pretty good for me on a DK weight yarn. The original pattern, I believe, is a 3.5. So my gauge is slightly different. I'm getting 21 stitches instead of 23, but it's not a huge amount difference compared to it, which maybe I'm just, well, I know I'm a looser knitter. Maybe Lucca's a very loose knitter, I don't know. So yep, and I'm using my little bee progress keeper that I made, which is now the wrong way around, which is there, with my little honeycomb, if I can see the little honeycomb stitch markers in there. They were from Fripperies and Bibelots, and the progress keeper I made myself. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about that. I haven't done a huge amount. Like I said, I've knit down to the underarm on the back and only part way on the front, but then I can join it once I get to here and just knit it flat back and forth. And yes, I am purling. Not a fan, but it's not so bad once you get to DK weight. It's fingering weight purling. Fingering weight purling sweater, I think, would be a little too much. So that brings us to the sewing part. Underneath my black cardigan, I am wearing a dress that I made a little while ago, but never seemed to get around to showing on the podcast. It is the Wren dress by Colette Patterns, and it is not in the clingy skirt view. I shall get the little booklet out. Okay, it is in view 2, which is a flared skirt, and it has a wrap front on the dress, and I've done short sleeves. So if I take this cardigan off, you can see it has short sleeves, which I'm not sure if it would be better with slightly longer sleeves, but there we go. And it is a crossover dress, so I'm going to show up, I'm going to stand up even and show you the dress better. The skirt has pleats in here, and it has quite a lot of fabric in the skirt, which is something I'm going to change. Also, the waistline is wrong on this dress for me. So I already took out almost an inch of fabric from the back of the bodice to make it fit on my waistline better. But even so, my waist is here and the dress wants to go up another 1/2 inch, I would say. The front, obviously my waist is here, is much too high, giving you this kind of empire line. I don't like an empire line dress. It makes me feel like I'm wearing a maternity dress. So the waistline wants to come there. So when I make this dress again, I will be taking at least an inch out of the back. An inch might be okay once I've lengthened the front waistline. So I've got to lengthen the front bodice to here, shorten the back bodice, because originally it was kind of down here before I took the inch out, which is way too low. Needs to be up here. Because I have some nice heavyweight black jersey fabric I want to make a second version of this in. Also, too much fabric here. Way too much. Like, whoa, too much. I live in a windy place. Plus, too much bulk going on here. So what I'm planning on doing is shortening the back by a good inch, maybe an 1.5 inches. Lengthening the front by a good inch. You would think it wouldn't work, but I'm sure it would. I'm busty, so it kind of makes it rise up. And like it says, I don't want to look like I'm wearing a maternity dress. I'm not pregnant. So I need to do that. I need to shorten this dress a little more. It needs a good maybe 2 inches off the length, because it is kind of just below the knee and I like mine to be just sitting just above the knee. I'm also a shrimp, so shortened. And the bulk out the skirt. What I'm thinking of doing, I need to check by measuring up, is using the smallest size skirt on the pattern to attach to the bodice size that I've used on the dress, and that should work out. There'll be less bulk. There's still plenty of width in it to give a little bit of pleating where it wants pleating, but there won't be so much excess space. A lot of problems with sewing patterns and clothes in general is often when they size up for larger sizes is that they size up everywhere. Like, I might be so many inches wider on the waist, that doesn't make me so many inches taller suddenly magically. You know, you put on weight, oh wow, I've grown in like 6 inches taller or something like that. So lengths are always longer, which is ridiculous. And things like sleeve lengths, and you think, my arms didn't grow in length with my waistline either. So I'm going to take some of the bulk out the skirt for it. Other than that, I mean, the pattern fits well for a pattern. This is the crossover thing. I'm wearing a little vest underneath it today, but that's because it's cold. But I can wear this, I don't know on my camera, but I can wear this without a vest underneath and not be falling out of my top, which often with these wrap over dresses, what I've had to do is stitch the top layer down across here, because otherwise I'm finding they kind of go like that, and this one will go like that, and I end up like hitching myself back in all the time. But this one doesn't. It's got these extra panels that go from here across, and they've got little pleats here, and everything, it seems to hold everything in position because it's got this seam. It just fits better, the same way that a princess seam will fit well on your bust, better than just a piece of fabric that's got, let's say, a dart in the side. A princess seam will just give you that extra bit of shaping, if you know what I mean, on a sewn bust pattern, on a bodice pattern rather. So other than that, I'm pleased with it. I did get a few different fabrics maybe about a month ago, and I've been cutting out the... My phone is ringing. Why is my phone ringing? I don't know who's ringing me. I cut out all my patterns ready. That's the thing that takes the longest really with sewing a garment. It's not so much sewing the garment, which takes long enough. It's all the prepping, the beginning. It's cutting out the pattern pieces, it's cutting out the fabric pieces. So that's what I have planned for some black jersey, but I also have some really nice fabrics which I'm cutting out patterns for as well. So in other news, what have we been up to? Well, we're still not really doing anything because, you know, I mentioned on the last podcast that I was going to try my hand at playing around with acid dyes, and I have. I've ordered some more because I enjoyed it so much. I was kind of limited when I was playing with yarns to, I only had a few mini skeins lying around to hand that I could use, so I need more bases, so they're on order. I've ordered some stuff for myself as well as for the shop, so I've got extra for me. And I only had primary coloured acid dyes to work with, so you know, blue, red, yellow and black. But I was limited on the amount of skeins I had, so I brought a few to show you because I really happy with some of these. So I mean, just look at that. This is why I like acid dye just as much as I like botanical dye. I might be a botanical yarn dyer, but I mean, like, holy smokes, look at the colour on that thing. It's like, I didn't start out this colour, I just kept adding different, you know, and I just love it. It's like this beautiful tealy green with foresty green, and then these little bits of turquoise and some little acidy green flecks and turquoise. It's just stunning. I mean, I would love to make a sweater in this. I have a green sweater, I have my swag sweater, which is a really beautiful green as well because it's botanically dyed by me. But this is like, oh my god, I love it. I love the little, so I love speckle yarns. That's why I tried to do speckle yarns with my botanical dyes, because I love speckles. But I especially like jeweled toned yarns with speckles. So I also did this, which looks really pink and plummy on there, and it isn't. It's definitely more of a deep violet, but it does have all these variations in it, which I adore. It's got like antique gold and a few little hot pink and blue little flecks in there. Like, it's looking very burgundy, when in reality, I don't know if I hold it alongside something else, it might, sometimes it can make the colours look better, but it's more of a violet colour, and I haven't got anything that will make it show its true colours. Nope, still showing up burgundy, but it's definitely more of a blue violet toned skin instead. But it's the richness you get with acid dyes that I really like, and the way you can really separate out the colours with speckles and such like, which I love. And again, I would love a sweater in this. I also made a kind of a, wow, that looks really bright on screen, and it's not. It's kind of a maroony rusty red with like golden undertones and stuff, and it's just, oh, and then it's like, wow, that looks really bright. Again, it's a little more muted in real life, but you know, light is blowing out today. Right back there, you can't see it anyway, so, but again, it's like gold and oranges, and oh, beautiful. So these are just a few, I mean, just like, oh. So I ordered some more acid dyes to play with and some more bases, and that should give me a little more scope to play with. And I don't know, I might have to make myself some sweater quantities of some really nice yarns, mostly because, right, okay, I love certain colours, and sometimes I get an idea in my head of the type of colour I want in a yarn, and I search all over the internet and cannot find exactly what I'm looking for. I can get close, or sometimes I can get really close, but they'll be in America or Australia or somewhere not in the UK, and import fees on the UK in the UK are phenomenally high, which sometimes you can kind of justify, sometimes, but like I want a specific red yarn for a sweater. It's very specific, and a specific shade of red with just the right toning and just the right speckles in it. And I haven't seen, I can't find exactly what I'm looking for. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to try my hand at acid dyes, is to be able to get those colours that I'm really looking for. Like this one, which you can't see, but in real life is pretty darn close to what is a colour that I want to make, I want for myself and can't get. And I'm really disappointed you can't see what colour that is in real. Oh, hang on, it looks a little more violet there. Well, that's a little better. But yeah, I want to make just the right colours. So that's what I've been doing, and pricking out seedlings because it's growing season. We have a very short growing season on Orkney. We only get warm weather second half of June and July, and once you get into pretty much the 1st of August, it's wet and humid. So we have a very short growing season, and we get cold winds all the way up until at least the middle of May. Last year we were getting strong winds up until at least the middle of June, which was a bit more unusual, but we do get them. So our growing season is very short. We now have a big greenhouse we built through last year's lockdown, so we're growing like tomatoes and beans and squash and stuff in there this year. So I've been pricking out my seedlings from their little modules into bigger pots before they go into the ground in there. So my days are either yarn dyeing and having my hands covered in dye, or in the garden and my nails full of soil. And they're not too bad today, but they usually, this is the reality of country living and a yarn dyer's life, is you are never clean. This is me clean I ever get. Normally not this clean. Or flour, because, you know, bread. I know what I did. I made sourdough bread. I know, I'm late to the party. But I'd been meaning to try making sourdough bread for a couple of years, but never really gotten around to it. I'd got flour, and I always have bread flour, but I'd, make sure I had some rye flour, because that's supposed to be good for getting away a starter. Never seemed to get around to it. And then beginning of last year, I'm gonna try this year, and then lockdown happened and everybody was making sourdough, and suddenly I was like, I can't, because everyone's making sourdough, so I can't make it now. I have to wait. I know. So a couple of months ago I started making up my starter once, the fad has gone now. And yeah, so I've made 2 loaves of sourdough. The first one was okay. It was a little damp and a little heavy. I don't think I'd left, I think my starter needed a bit more, time. And the second one came out lovely. Really pleased with it. Conclusions I've drawn from sourdough making with bread. First of all, it's nice. It works really well once you get your starter going properly. Surprisingly well. It takes a lot longer to kind of get it to that point, because I do a kind of a no knead bread making anyway, which basically means I mix up a slightly damper version of a bread dough the night before and leave it overnight, and then just shape it ready for baking late morning the next day. I think the original got the idea from the John Seymour book of self-sufficiency, where he made a very wet dough, more like a batter, and leave it overnight, and it gets really, really bubbly and really fills up the bowl, and then you add extra flour and stuff. I kind of do somewhere in between, so it's slightly wetter, but it's not a wet dough. You can still kind of mix it with a, like a paddle. And so doing the sourdough, I just kind of used the same sort of technique. I just used sourdough starter instead of using yeast. I found it obviously takes longer to get to the point where it's ready for baking. And I'm not convinced that it's any better than using yeast for a bread. The flavour's great, but I like bread, sourdough bread anyway, but I also like bread that hasn't got that sourdough taste. So I'm not sure. My starter is sitting in the fridge and I'm not sure if I'll keep making sourdough bread, or because now I know I can do it and it works, or whether just leave that as kind of like your emergency thing if you can't get yeast like we had at the beginning of lockdown, and just carry on with yeast making bread. I just don't know whether it's worth the extra time and effort to make it, unless I specifically want a sourdough like a ciabatta or something like that, whether I just want to make regular crusty bread. So that's my conclusions on sourdough bread making. It's great, but it's kind of like that question, what is the question that a sourdough starter is the answer for compared to using yeast? I don't know. It just seems like more work and a bit of fancy, unless you want a tangy bread, which you don't always do. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there because this is going to get really, really long and I don't know how much I'm going to edit out. But I'm going to go and have a cup of coffee now because I'm really well thirsty. So I'm going to go now. So thank you for watching and I shall speak to you again soon. Bye bye.